put the title of this video, We Muslims owe Russia and to a lot of extent also China a lot, because in the last, last 20 years after the Soviets and even before that, Russia helped Iran with a lot of military technology that changed the war that was going on between Iraq and Iran. They helped us with rocket technology, with electronic warfare, the first drone technology. What else? Also, the Russian diplomats helped Iran, counterbalance United States and Wahhabis or Baathis, and they are usually a lot more level-headed. And actually, I think that after World War II, Russia or the Soviets withdraw from Iran after, and they are neighbors and they have to do that. But there was some kind of understanding. I was watching one of these movies. It was about nuclear war if it would happen. I think that the Soviets had threatened the Americans that if you attack Iran or if you occupy Iran, we'll nuke you, because that's like a passageway to warm waters, and they didn't want the United States as their neighbor. And in this nuclear scenario, I was watching that the Americans had actually done something like that, and they were being nuked. That was like a World War III scenario movie. But Iran had a puppet government under Shah. Then that government, thought that it can protect its borders and do this and that. But really, it never was a kind of match for the Soviets, and it was really the Soviets themselves that they didn't want to invade, or they basically, what I'm saying is that they kept the peace. It wasn't something that they had to do. They did it on their own. The same after the fall of the Soviet Union, the relations has always been good, and it got better under Putin. And then also Iran got nuclear technology, got protection when the sanctions were imposed on Iran oil, and was able to get foreign currency. What else? Iran and Russia helped get rid of the terrorists that were in Syria, the ISIS. They were really sponsored by extreme Wahhabis, Baathis, and Turkey itself is influenced by these extreme Muslims, and the place became a wreck. But then they lost, and it was really the Russian Air Force that put an end to it, because there's nothing in the U.S. arsenal that's any kind of match for superior fighters, that the Sukhoi class fighters. And then they also have stealth rockets that they can fire from the sea or land. All this technology also came to Iran, and lately, in the last 10 years, the technology that's anti-aircraft technology, like S-300, S-400, and Iran now has the technology and makes its own Stinger missiles and its own systems that are similar to S-300. I think there was one system that they were talking about was wasn't S, it was called Bavar 370, something like that. It's a system I think between S-300 and S-400 was built in Iran. Anyhow, the Russians they have a lot more sanity in their foreign relations, in relations with Muslim countries, and a lot of Iranians they're infatuated with the luxury goods that come from Europe, and also European have real long history, like Italians and French. They have very long history with Iran, and when the sanctions were removed, the Iranian government and also Italians and the French were very eager to sign new contracts and do business. But the European Union sucks. They are very much influenced by their bankers, which is this just Rothschild or Jewish extremists like Zionists that own and operate their banks, and also their politicians. They are very beholden to the Israelis, and they can come in and overturn any kind of decisions they make. Germans have a little bit more backbone, and I guess the British, they found their own backbone with Brexit, but in total they suck, and they cause more problems. The business with them is very flip-floppy. Whenever United States comes around and does some stupid thing or wants to start another war, then the British help them, or the politicians start the propaganda machine. I think that if Iranian businesses or Iranian companies or individuals, they have a fetish for European women or products, Russia is a huge place. All this stuff is there, and you don't have to deal with the Europeans. They're so screwed up. They have no foreign policy. They have no independent government. They are financially very bankrupt because the cabal that owns and operates their bank have indebted them to such an extent, and they are all now becoming ultra-nationalists, like similar to fascism, but something like that. And on top of all of this, they're blaming like foreigners, anybody, non-European, what little immigration or business that they had now is getting squandered with these charades that are going on. Then I think that the economic future of Europe is more like disintegration and bankruptcy. For example, right now, a lot of the companies or buildings even, or property in London is owned by different Arab countries like Qataris or Bahrainis, and the government itself every once in a while goes around and finds a way, or in a sneaky way, to help the Americans or overthrow another Muslim countries. For example, what Blair did in Libya, and the place is a huge mess. Nobody talks about this stuff. I think in the United States that there is only Salente that even mentions this stuff. For example, the stuff with Libya and Somali, places like that. There is almost no commentator that talks anything about it. And then Well, in the Muslim tradition or hadith, there is this saying that whoever kills Muslims or overthrows Muslim governments or ruins the place, it, God will punish that nation. They will be afflicted with poverty and disintegration. And that's, I think, what's going to happen to Europe and United States is that it will experience a huge economic collapse and disintegration, and many different parts of it will become each like a little ragtag kind of government, and the Europeans down to the level of their women, they're gonna sell themselves off to the Arabs or the Chinese or the Koreans. The place is gonna lose its economic sovereignty first, and then it will filter into the political arena. For example, in London, the mayor is like some Arab guy, Khan or something, and other smaller places in England, they got more white population, but as you get into big cities, many places are owned by foreigners. This goes ditto. Well, in France, I heard that in the Paris, a lot of very nice boutiques and shops, they have closed, they have no business, and as all this mess is going on, the Europeans are becoming more hostile to foreigners who actually bring in all the money that comes from tourism or buying all these products. They become more. Then on top of all of this, what they had constructed with ISIS resulted in many French getting killed in the previous attacks, and now that the ISIS is subdued, then the population has become ultra-nationalist and extremely hostile to immigration, and all this Brexit, and I think there will be a French exit or Italian exit before French, and it spells poverty, because when there is freedom of movement of people and money, then that's where prosperity comes from trade, from international trade, tourism, people going from place to place, doing business with each other, and also a lot of bonds that are formed because of intermarriages, like some Moroccan or Algerian guy going into France and marrying a French girl, and then the next generation is not really the original French. They're like a mixed race, but they call themselves French, but then the money too migrates, and there is the ties with Africa. All that stuff is dissipating and collapsing because of ultra-nationalism. I don't know this form of fascism, how long it will last in Europe, but I think it all spells poverty and disintegration. But whereas a lot of Asian countries and Russia itself and China, the people are not so nutty with their ultra-nationalism, and everything is cheaper, and economies are on the rise. For Iran and Iranians, it's better to forget about Europe and the United States and all the trouble they cause, and then do business with very not only cheaper but also a lot more friendly. I think Russians are pretty friendly, and there was this Sufi master, and whoever asked him, "Hey, where are you from?" He would say, "I'm not married yet, so whoever or whatever woman from a place marries me, then I'm from there. So like a lot of ties, a lot of relations become stronger, not by a military force and campaign, but by intermarriages, by people becoming connected, and the freedom of trade and business that comes with it. I think that the United States too, if it doesn't disintegrate, it would become like a real fascist state. Usually when empires die, what they leave behind is a little fucking fascist state, like Erdogan in Turkey, or Yeltsin, when the Soviets died out, something like that. And this place too. Well, now Trump is gonna saying that. Well, Zelensky said that Trump is gonna bring the troops home, and he made peace with North Korea and Iran. And I think he would have never done any of this stuff had they not known secretly that they're very bankrupt and nobody is buying the U.S. treasuries, and they're printing money and paying themselves off, and they know it too. So usually with Americans, everything seems jolly and good as before, but here and there you hear that Trump complaining to NATO that, hey, we are paying for all this stuff, and then Zelensky came out and said, hey, they want to bring the troops from Europe, from South Korea and Afghanistan. They are bankrupt and they know it too. And Trump is no different than other U.S. politicians. And if they weren't, they didn't have their face in the mud, they wouldn't even think about this stuff. Well, before Trump, I think Kerry was doing something similar. He was going around and appeasing regimes that United States had really battered. Like they tried with North Korea and they said no, but then they tried with Cuba and made peace with Cuba so they can do trade. And then in Iran, Kerry came around. Recently, Iranian government was saying that they're going to release the names of politicians, European and United States, that had accepted bribes and made the nuclear agreement. The whole thing was a fraud. Nobody signed it, but it was a complete fraud because Iran already has nukes, and even if they say we do or we don't, if you are Iranian and you're born there, you totally know that an Iranian will not be an Iranian general or an Iranian military person if he didn't know a little bit of Iranian history. It's just like in the middle of a highway in Asia, and we've been invaded by absolutely anybody, the Greeks and the Russians and the British and the Arabs and the Turks and the Afghanis, whoever. So this place will not have any kind of security if there wasn't a nuclear umbrella. So the whole thing is complete charade and a fraud, and they were just appeasing each other so they could do business, because the Americans, they knew they were going bankrupt, and the Europeans, they already are bankrupt, and they wanted to get any foreign trade that they can. So what's happening right now is that Europeans are giving lip service to the Americans, but they continue to do business at these huge volumes with Russia, with Iran, with anybody that wants their crap, and then they come around and try to appease the Americans and the Iranians. Well, after the Trump withdrew from the nuclear agreement, the Europeans said, send in all their politicians. I guess Iran is not going to release the names of the crooked foreign ministers that accepted bribes and signed the original nuclear deal, because then they are signing the new one, right, without the United States. So yeah, I think the future is a bankruptcy, end of military tourism. They're going from place to place and setting the place on fire. And I want to add that I think that Iran and Syria and the Shia Muslims, or many Muslims, we really owe Russia for stepping in and putting an end to a lot of these things. And their sanity and the Chinese sanity and the desire to do business, and now war, and it already won. I don't know how it's going to end with Israel. I think somebody's going to finish them off, and they are not very far. They're like the Palestinians that are inside Israel. I think they're receiving tremendous amount of money and weapons. This is just my feeling. I know that the Iranian government gives them $3 billion. That's might be an understatement. I think they secretly receive money from many Arab countries, many places, and weapons that's out there. Well, the war in Gaza continues, and still I only know of 2 people in the entire United States that talk about this. Celente, and there is another gentleman, his name is slipped my mind. He's Jewish too. I'm gonna remember it, and hopefully in this video. But he talks about it, and this Israeli regime has had 7 years of warfare and criminality. I think the end is now very far. It's not going to be in the hands of too many foreigners. They got plenty of enemies inside their own borders. Well, another issue, another thing that I think will change things around is that of introduction of S-300, S-400, and many anti-aircraft systems. So that kind of disables Israel from using their planes. For example, F-15, F-22, they're expensive planes. But now, for example, Iran makes Stinger missiles equivalent. I think many militaries, they have these. I was reading some off-world newspaper, and they were saying that many F-14s Israel has, they become damaged because this is like 10 years ago. The Palestinians have a crude anti-aircraft that you just zoom in when you hear the plane, and the charge on it was not very much, so it would hit the wing or the side of the plane and damage it, and they had to ground the really expensive plane. Well, an F-22 in price, or F-35 in price, it overshadows any kind of handheld Stinger type missile system. I think that they will switch to rockets and drones, and then there's plenty of those. I think the condition there is going to change, even though not much talked about. Well, there is one news source, Israel, that online, he calls himself Khabri, and he tells everything as it happens. He doesn't hide it or predefy it or anything. So But he also goes on and reads all this Old Testament and tries to show how this God of Israel is really gonna come in and do things differently for them, and they're the ones that are gonna beat China and Russia and Iran, or is Turkey is gonna side with Israel? I don't know. What do you think? Uh, yeah. Well, I think that in the international field, if we imagine Earth to be like a ship, a big ship, China and Russia, they've been massive anchors to just keep the ship from rocking or sinking or going anywhere that they don't want or international business doesn't want. Well, thank you very much for being in my YouTube channel, and please subscribe and leave a comment.